what makes you your first 100 grand or $100,000 isn't what makes you your next 200, 300, 400 or 500,000 pounds or dollars. It's a different set of skills that you need to get to that next level. But initially, when you're first starting out, to make your first 100k, 100 grand, it takes a lot of sweat equity, a lot of work, smart work, as well as hard work, just to get off the ground. And to be honest, it's complete chaos. That first £100,000 it's complete madness, you know, like, and normally it takes a couple years. Contrary to what most people say on social media, it takes a good couple years to actually consistently be making 100 grand a year. You might get to 6, 7, 8, 9 grand a month here and there, but if you're a new startup and you're a new business, the chances are you're probably gonna have to reinvest back into the business, right? And that money that you make on those good months goes back into the machine to grow and scale the business. There's also unexpected problems that occur, expenses, things that you need to put money into to solve. So that happens. So it normally takes 2, sometimes even 3 years to get to that £100,000 clear profit mark, right? And I know some of you might be watching this thinking you can do it sooner. I was just like you, I thought the same. But when you're starting something new, you're learning on the job, you're winging it to a certain extent, you're reinvesting back in, and it's actually very difficult, you know, and it can take some time to get to that first £100,000 milestone. Now, you don't need to be particularly skilled to get to that stage. You can just be very determined, have a high work ethic. You can be solving a problem for someone, a very valuable problem that needs solving, and with sweat equity, you can do it. But it's not going to be an overnight thing, and it's probably going to take you 18 months to 2, maybe even 2.5, 3 years. So if you're starting your business, understand that first and foremost. Have a realistic expectation of what you can achieve so that you don't give up too soon once you're not making 100 grand in your first 6 months to a year. If I could think about my own business and how it went for me, I got to around £5,000 a month in my first year with my rent-to-rent business, but I was still reinvesting back into the business. So I was spending money on marketing to landlords, sending letters every month, driving down to Wales from London, speaking with landlords, speaking with agents. I was doing a lot of outreach, and that was obviously costing me money. I was also, whenever I got a new deal, I would put 5 grand or 4 grand back into that rent-to-rent deal to pay 2 months to a landlord to set the property up, buy furniture, and then I'll be able to rent it out to working professionals for a profit. But every few months I'll be taking on another deal, so whenever I made 5 grand, I'd have to put it back in, right? So to get to that point where I was clearly making 10 grand a month, that took me a couple years to get to that stage. And that was at a point where I had stopped taking on new properties and I was happy with what I had. So I stopped spending 4 or 5 grand every few months. Now, to make your first £100,000 or dollars, you can get away with just being a bulldozer, creating like a tornado of just chaos and energy spent mainly on finding a client, finding a potential customer, adding value to them, getting the deal over the line. For rent to rent, that would be finding landlords, negotiating and renting the property from them for a long term, and then finding tenants to go in there, tenant the property and pay you more than you're paying the landlord, right? And you can get away with doing that over and over again for your first year, 2 years even, and that will get you to £100,000. But what you have to understand is that first year to 2 years, you're constantly reinvesting back in the business, you're plugging holes, leaks that you have everywhere, you're trying to make sure you're actually profitable. It takes a couple of years to get to the stage where you can actually consolidate and start having sort of clear 6, 7, 8 to 10 grand months where you don't have to actually invest back in. You've solved all the problems, your properties aren't leaking money, you've fixed the systems, you're making sure you're not losing money to energy, or you've made sure that your pricing's right with tenants and you're making a fair margin, and hopefully you've got some longer term people in there so it becomes a bit more predictable, a bit more sustainable and consistent. And that can take a couple years to get to that stage, right? But once you've got to that point, it then takes a different set of skills to get to 200 to 500,000 pounds. And you have to be a bit cuter, you have to be a bit more streamlined with what you do, where you put your energy as the entrepreneur, because you run out of leads at some point. You can't just keep running around speaking to landlords. You have to start doing a higher volume of marketing to them, and you have to start cherry picking the properties that you take on and the properties or the landlords that you work with, because not all landlords are going to be the right type of person. And again, it can take you a couple of years to realize that and get rid of the bad eggs and only keep the good ones. So what gets you to £100,000 is graft, sweat equity, finding landlords, closing them, finding tenants to pay you more, and getting those deals over the line. That can get you to 100 grand. But to get to 500 grand, you then have to be cuter. You have to start streamlining your processes. You have to increase your marketing volume. You do get benefits of the proof of concept that you have from your first 5-10 properties. You can use those as testimonials and get referrals to show new clients, potential new clients. But my point is, initially you need a lot of energy, a lot of resilience, and a lot of your own sweat equity goes into getting to that first £100,000. Once you get to that stage, you can then start employing people, and maybe you bring in a couple assistants or a handyman or a lettings manager to help you with some of the operations, so you can then focus even more on marketing and speaking to more landlords, getting new clients, and really becoming the marketeer of your business. That's where you need to be constantly bringing in leads and getting sales over the line, right? So my point is, you can get to 100 grand by just being a bulldozer, right? That's what I did, and that will get you so far, and that normally takes a couple years to get to that stage. But then to get to 500 grand, you've got to start being cuter. You've got to free up some of your time, whether that be employing people, building systems, so you can then focus on becoming a master marketer and really narrowing down on your exact ideal customer and serving them as best you can to a very high standard. That's how you get to 200, 300, 400, 500 grand, by being very particular with who you work with, by becoming a master marketer, and by creating systems that make the whole business run smoother so that you can be more efficient with your time, efforts and energy. So you can't use the same strategies that you use to get to 100k to get to 500k. It doesn't work like that. And then there's a different set of skills that you need to get from 500k to £1 million. The way I like to see it in my head is you start off quite wide in terms of the tasks that you have to do and the energy that you're putting into getting the business off the ground, and then each level you go up 100 grand, 200 grand, 500 grand. You start to narrow down on the needle moving activities that really get you moving forward quicker, and you cut out any inefficiencies, or you outsource any jobs that you're not necessarily good at or that make you less operationally efficient, and you focus solely on marketing, becoming a master marketer, cherry picking the best clients, improving your service in terms of deliverables, in terms of fulfillment, making that whole process as smooth as possible. And then you start getting more people over the line, more clients, and you grow that way. But it's a different set of skills. So for you startup people, just get off the ground, use your sweat equity. That will get you so far. And then when it gets to the point where you've made 100 grand, which is probably going to take you a couple years to consistently be profiting that much, then you need to learn a new set of skills and start incorporating systems, employing some help, focusing on becoming a master marketer, and improving your fulfillment process. So that's my 2 pence for the day. I hope you're having a lovely day, whoever you are, wherever you are watching this. If you want me to help you build or grow your rent-to-rent business, I'll put a link in the video description below. Click the link, book a call. It's a free call. You'll have to answer some questions to see if you qualify for the call. If you do, we'll have a conversation, see if we're a good fit for each other, and if so, then I'd love to work with you. If not, then keep watching my YouTube videos and try and learn from them. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.